All right, so the first situation is here where I'm belaying a climber. Of course, you have some backup on the strand here. Then we have to mule a munter into an overhand finish. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so we have the munter mule overhand finish. I'm going to put a sling into the shelf, and I'm going to extend that down to a microtraction. Now you can put fabric on fabric if there's no abrasion in the fabric, meaning the fabric's not rubbing. In this case, it's not going to be. It will be a static load here. When you put on the microtraction, what you want to make sure is it can slide toward the victim or toward the load here. So I'm going to put that on with the cam facing up. Now I just pull that down. I just want to take out as much slack as I can. The next step is to release the munter mule overhand finish, release that load into the microtraction. Now as that's happening, I'm going to use my foot down here to pull the load. Excellent. Now as you see, the microtraction is taking the load, and I can just remove here the munter from the focal point carabiner. Now the thing to consider, I'm going to make sure I leave the focal point carabiner here because I am loading the shelf, so I want to make sure something's in the focal, hypothetically, in case the knot were to slip or roll, whatever the case would be. So at this point now, we have the microtraction, and this would be taking the load. I will put a Prusik here and make a 3-to-1 for rescue. We're going to move down here to check out the block and tackle. Okay, so for the block and tackle, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a 3-wrap Prusik on the rope here. I'm going to make an overhand knot, don't forget me knot here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra carabiner to this extension here so then I can create a mechanical advantage system, which you'll see in a moment. Okay, now I'm just going to run this through the carabiners. And I'm going to pull this tight. Okay, now as I pull, you can see what's happening is this is shortening here, which allows me to remove the microtraction. I'm just going to put a mule here. Now, we can just do a really quick thing. We can either finish it with 2 half hitches or an overhand. You could also just pull this tight and put the tails between the loop or in the loop here. Okay, so now we have this set up, this compress the system a bit. We're going to go back up here to the focal point. So at this point, I can put the munter back on, and I'm gonna mule this munter. And now we should have still some slack in the system here, so I can remove the microtraction. And now at this point, I can release the load here. And as I do that, you can see the munter here is tensioning, and I can remove the block and tackle and the extension. Okay, now at this point, all I would do is remove the overhand mule here, and then I would be able to belay the person back up again, of course, making sure all my carabiners are locked and everything is done there. So now we're going to move to load transfer. Now load transfer is typically used when you have something like you can lower the load into. A munter, you can lower the load into something else like a Prusik. A microtraction, you cannot lower the load, so a microtraction requires there to be slack here, so then you have to use a block and tackle to compress the system, and that generates slack. Here we can lower the load, so we're going to use the load transfer Prusik here. Okay, now in this case, what I'm also going to do at this point, of course, this has already been muled here. I'm just going to put an overhand somewhere on the end of this. I can attach that to the shelf here. And the thing to consider is that since the load is going to be on the Prusik, and I'm only going to have a Prusik only on the load, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take the end here, that's why I have this visible. I'm going to just make a clove hitch here as my catastrophe backup. Okay, so at this point what I can do is I can make sure that this Prusik is going to grip, and now I can release the munter and lower the load into the Prusik. All right, now the Prusik is maintaining the load. Now what I can do is I can remove this. I'm just going to put my progress capture device on here. The microtraction likes a specific type of carabiner, so in that case I use an oval carabiner. And this will slide toward the victim. Okay, now in this point what I can do is I just put this back down here. I can release, as I pull the slack out of here, I can release this here. And now I could just make a 3-to-1, like so. I'm going to pull that. All right, as soon as I get that slack out, I can then release this. And now this is no longer restricting my movement, so I could bring this Prusik all the way down to the edge. And that is load transfer into a Prusik.